Welcome back to Captain Harold DeMarrero's River Stories. I don't know if we're ever going to get done with these Jag stories. First we got to finish up Cap firing one of the owners of the company.
Well, that's an important thing that happened in my life. Was let's look at what happened to make me want to actually fire the owner of the company, one of them, and that is that when we got to St. Louis, we was going up to hook up. We dropped our barges off from going south, tied them up, and finally got that done. You know, with them rudders and crazy rudders, and the engines that wouldn't stop when you put them in reverse. You know, and the engine would just die, just go dead. So we was going up to pick up our barges to go back north, and we hit the end of these barges so hard that, and because of the engines were dead, and I was coming up, and bam, I hit the boat right into them, knocked a big hole in the end of the barges, and Mr. Goodman, one of the owners, came up, and I told him, I says, you know, the engine went dead. He said, I know. He said, I couldn't get it started. And I said, well, you know, we need to call the people who were working for him, tell them. He said, I'll call him. He gets on the phone, he calls me. He says, this barge we're picking up, I just want to let you know that it was damaged when we picked it up. You know, and I says, man, I am not going to work for a company that operates like that. So anyway, I called up Mr. Weathers, who was the major stockholder in the company. I said, Mr. Weathers, I can't deal with it anymore. I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave you. Well, what's wrong, Cap? And I says, and I told him what had just happened. And, you know, he says, is he not doing the job for you? I said, no, sir, he's not. And he's the reason I'm going to leave. He said, no, you're not going to leave. He says, fire him. I said, well, I can't fire him. He's one of the owners. And he says, call him up there to the pilot house. So I called him up, and we had it was an old type cell phone, ZAZF telephone, you know, ship to shore type thing. It was pretty much private. And he comes up and, and the next thing he says, well, Big George, which is Mr. Weathers, Big George says I wasn't feeling too well, and he says he wants me to come home. I said, well, that's fine, Mr. Weathers. Sorry you're not feeling good. Bye. And he got off the boat, and then they sent me a pretty decent engineer. His name was Mike Dutching. And Mike come on, and he started getting things a little bit better, not much better. And I told him, I says, look, something's got to be done with these rudders. And so anyway, they says, well, what do you want done? I says, I am not going to work for you with rudders that I never know where they are. And so they says, all right, we'll get something done. So the minute we got to St. Louis on the next trip down, we went into the shipyard, completely took that system off, put an entirely new system on, a Caterpillar ram system that worked perfectly, and it made 100% in the way that the boat was. I knew it was a good boat. You know, it had 2,400 horsepower, and did a good job for a small boat. Wasn't like the boats that were built at the barge line companies. Those boats were like 150 feet long. This boat was 100, but it's built under the Greenville, Mississippi standards of these farmers and small-time rivermen that were building these boats down there. But it was a good boat. It was a boat I liked. So my job next was to start building a crew for this boat. And so I had Mike, a good chief engineer. I had M.L. Chandler, one of the guys that had been the head deckhand on the boat. He made a good deckhand. And the most fortunate thing that happened to me, you know, I told you about the companies going non-union, and the first one was American Barge Line. Well, when I was sitting at a lock, and here comes one of the best mates at American Barge Line, a union mate, come up and asked me for a job. I told him, I said, you know, now we're non-union. And he says, I understand, I just need a job. And so I hired him. Then he gave me the name of another American Barge Line mate, a Hank Wildman, and I brought him in. And I had two first-class licensed mates. Unbelievable for a little boat out of Greenville, you know. But these guys really knew their stuff. They knew how to make rigging, not only, you know, put rigging down, they knew how to make it. And they were an incredible part of my crew. Then I went through, I had one of the guys that had been there so long, his name was James Julian, and they called him Little Red. He was a little red-headed guy. So I had, anyway, James Lovell. He was the first mate that I got, that I hired on from American Barge Line. He was called Big Red. So I had Big Red and Little Red. And then I had another deckhand, Red Harvey. And Red Harvey ended up, we just called him Harvey. There was enough Reds when I was calling out Big Red, Little Red. I didn't want Red number 3, you know. So anyway, I made up a pretty good crew. And then I started looking for better pilots. And so one in particular that I had known, he was another ex-Barge Line pilot that, you know, when the union was over, he was out of a job. And so his name was Raymond Webb. Now Raymond had married this young 16-year-old girl, and Raymond's passed away long ago. But he married this girl, and he'd be out on the river on a boat, he'd get calls that she's running around on him, you know. So he quit his job on the river and he went back, and he was working at a tire factory making tires, you know. And I mean, it was one of these total labor jobs, you know, where he's picking up stuff, laying down stuff. It wasn't no great job. And I found out his phone number, and I called, and I said, Raymond, how would you like to go back to work on the river? He said, thank God, you called. And so I hired him, picked him up. Matter of fact, that night, I was
ready to go.
Yeah, I was right around, he lived in Helena, and I was right there close to Helena. He come out that night, man. I picked him off the riverbank. He was ready. And then I had another couple of Chuck White. Chuck was from Paducah, and he was a pretty good drinker, you know. He had to kind of watch him that he didn't sneak a bottle on the boat, you know. But he was excellent, excellent pilot. And his dad, I can't remember his dad's name, but his dad was a pilot over there for us too.
Mr. White.
Yeah, but he would sometimes get smashed on the boat, you know. So anyway, I had a pretty good crew, and so I kept staying with the Jag and staying with the Jag, and then I took up I got an interest in being a lawyer. I don't know, I get bored with being on towboats, and so I took this LaSalle Blackstone law course, and I ordered all the books, and I still got all the books, and ordered all the courses, and the courses have since vanished. And I took one lesson, and then I got an A+ on it, the correspondence, you know, and then
Okay, Cap, we're going to have to wrap it up. They're going to have to find about your law school later.